All right, guys, tonight we're going to be talking about subtraction rules. So this is section 2.3, subtraction of real numbers, and you want to make sure that you have out pencil and paper as always. Okay, this is the basic way of looking at how to subtract. It says subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. And I know that you guys learned this back in middle school. So if we have a minus b, that can also be considered a plus negative b, changing the minus sign into plus a negative. So for an example here, we have 3 minus 5 would be the same as 3 plus negative 5. And probably some of your teachers may have taught you to manipulate the problem. For example, this minus sign right here, you can actually just overwrite it. Knowing that subtraction is the same as adding the opposite, if you were taught to change this to plus a negative 5 like that, that is completely fine with me. Totally fine whatsoever. Notice that when we have 3 plus negative 5, we end up converting subtraction into addition. And when we convert this into an addition, what type of problem do we have? Well, we have a war problem. Positive 3 and a negative 5, and I think you know who's going to win that battle. It's definitely going to be the negatives, and they will win by 2. Okay, if only it were that easy. I've been doing this long enough to know that not every problem looks as easy as the 3 minus 5 one, and students still get confused from time to time. So we're going to look at all of the different types of subtraction problems that you're going to come across, because sometimes that first number is negative and that can confuse you. Sometimes you're going to see minus a negative, which you don't see in this problem. That could confuse you. And I really want to simplify all of the types of subtraction problems that you're going to see. Okay, so just like the other day when we did addition and we had 2 types of addition problems, okay, I'm going to say that there are basically 2 types of subtraction problems. Type 1 and type 2. I don't really have a sexy name for these like war and get mugged twice. You guys would just have to memorize them as the first kind and the second kind. Okay, so here's the type 1 problem. For the type 1 problem, when you see just a minus sign, change it to plus a negative. Once you've changed it to addition, then you're going to follow the rules for war and get mugged twice. Okay, so symbolically, here's what that's going to look like. Notice I say just a minus sign. Okay, that's not a negative sign, and that's not minus a negative. Okay, we'll attack that in type 2. But I'm saying when you see just a minus sign between your 2 numbers, okay, that minus sign is going to convert into plus a negative. And the problem that we just did on the previous screen, this would be an example of a type 1 problem. So let's go ahead and practice some type 1 problems together. And if you want, feel free to pause and answer these on your own. Maybe the first one we can do is something as simple as 2 minus 7. Okay, and if you want to copy these down on your paper, go ahead and do so now. That would probably be a good idea. 2 minus 7. Okay, that's going to convert into 2, and what do we change that minus sign to? We change it to plus a negative, adding the opposite. So 2 minus 7 converts into 2 plus negative 7. And yeah, you probably need to put parentheses around that negative 7, but just to simplify things, I'm not going to worry so much about the parentheses right now. Notice that now we have an addition problem, okay? And what type of addition problem are we looking at? Did we convert it to a war problem, or did we get mugged twice? In this case, we have a war. So what would your answer be? Well, the negatives win, and they win by 5. So 2 minus 7 is negative 5. All right, let me give you another one. Let's do negative 6. Oh, scratch that. Change my mind. Let's do 15 minus 8. Now sometimes when we get a problem like 15 minus 8, I'll just call this second grade. We all know 15 minus 8 is 7, right? We learned that a long time ago. But these rules still apply here. Okay, so 15 minus 8 would convert into what type of addition problem? Well, let's see. We're going to get 15, and that minus sign is going to change into plus a negative. So we're talking about 15 plus negative 8. Is that war or get mugged twice? Well, we have another war here. This time the positives win, and they win by 7. You can stick with second grade and just go straight to 7, but I want you to see that changing it to adding the opposite or changing it to plus a negative still works. And also, you know, if any of you guys were taught to just work on the problem, like if you're doing this off of a worksheet or a test and you want to just go ahead and take this minus sign and overwrite it like this, I am totally fine with that. That will save you some time, no big deal. I'm just kind of writing these out for the purpose of your notes. All right, let's do one more example. Now this one might look a little bit more confusing, but we're going to follow the same rules. So negative 9 minus 5. Okay, notice when we are looking in between the 9 and the 5, okay, we see just a minus sign, just like all of the ones we've done before. Okay, and 2 minus 7, just a minus sign in here. 15 minus 8, just a minus sign. And so type 1 problems are when we see just a minus sign. Okay, we're going to convert this. The negative 9 stays the same, just like the other two numbers. Okay, it began as a negative 9, it stays as a negative 9. That negative sign is not in play. We're just concerned about that minus sign in between the two. And that minus sign converts to plus a negative. Okay, so we have negative 9 plus negative 5. What type of problem are we looking at here? Is this war or get mugged twice? Okay, well, since you have the negative up front and the negative in the back, this is a get mugged twice. And so remember, with the get mugged twice, it's you lose 9, you lose 5, you've lost 14. Okay, so that's your type 1 problem. Now, you're going to have to be able to keep the type 1 rule in your mind differentiated from the type 2 rule. Okay, so here is a type 2 problem. For type 2 problems, it says when you see minus a negative, change it to plus, or change it to plus a positive, whichever way you were taught. Then once you change it to addition, you'll follow the rules for war and get mugged twice. So symbolically, here is the minus a negative structure I'm referring to. When you see minus a negative, minus some negative number. Okay, whenever you see that structure, you have a type 2 problem, and that minus a negative converts to plus, or plus a positive. And the reason that works is because when you get rid, okay, if you think about what minus a negative might mean, when you get rid of something negative, that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. So getting rid of something negative is the same as adding it. Okay, let's see what this looks like in a couple of examples. And I would copy these down on your paper. All right. These numbers are going to look kind of familiar to you. With the type 1 problem, we began with 2 minus 7. Let's take a look at 2 minus negative 7. Notice that in between that 2 and 7, we see the minus a negative structure. That makes this a type 2 problem. And this is going to convert to 2. And we take that minus a negative and we turn it into a plus. So 2 plus 7. And 2 plus 7. That's neither war or get mugged twice. That's just second grade stuff. Okay, so second grade stuff. We don't even need to categorize because it should be easy. 2 plus 7 is 9. So you can think of that as kind of like on the number line. 2 minus 7, you'd start at 2 and go 7 to the left. 2 minus negative 7, you start at 2 and go 7 to the right, and you end up at 9. I know some of you are taught on the number line. Also, sometimes teachers will teach you guys to look at the original minus a negative structure and maybe change this into plus a positive. And that is totally fine with me if you were taught to do that. It's the same thing. Or some teachers even taught you to maybe change this into a ginormous plus sign. That is totally cool with me too. Okay, that will save you some time. All right, let's take a look at another one. Let's try, and this one I'm going to purposely make a little bit more confusing. Let's try negative 6 minus negative 10. Don't get thrown off by that negative number out front, okay? It just so happens that in the first problem, the first number was positive. In the second problem, the first number is negative. I mean, you got a 50-50 chance there. It really has no bearing what the first number is all about. What we're looking at is what's in between the numbers. Okay, here we see that minus a negative structure. That minus a negative structure. Very different than in the type 1 problem. Okay, so that's what we're looking for in the type 2. And we're just going to convert this to negative 6. That negative stays the same because it's not in play here. And then the minus a negative changes to a plus. So we're going to have negative 6 plus 10. All right, now that we've converted it to addition, what type of problem is that? Well, we have a war. And the positives win, and they're going to win by 4. Okay, let's take a look at one more. Let's try negative 15 minus negative 3. Okay, what will that convert to? Well, that's going to convert to negative 15, big fat plus 3. And do we have war or get mugged twice? Well, we have war again. This time the negatives win, and they win by 12. So if we go back up to that definition of a type 2 problem, it says when you see minus a negative, change it to plus, then follow the rules for war and get mugged twice. If you've been thinking your way through this, you know, if we change that second number to a positive, which we do every single time, there's actually no way we can ever end up with the get mugged twice problem. So really we'll just be following the rules for war, or we might get some kind of second grade situation like we did in the first one with 2 plus 7. All right, so that's the type 2 problem. Hopefully you now understand the difference between type 1 and type 2. For our practice tonight, I'm going to give you both types mixed up. You need to be able to identify which type of problem you're looking at and then also come up with the correct answer. All right, so adding on with your pencil and paper. Here are your problems for example 1. Now before you do anything, let's just kind of briefly talk and see if we can identify what types we're talking about here. So let's look at number 1. It says 8 minus 13. Do you think that that's a type 1 or a type 2? Okay, well, you see just a minus sign in between the two numbers. That's going to be a type 1. Take a look at number 2. 6 minus negative 2. All right, you're going to notice that minus a negative structure. That's going to be a type 2. Take a look at number 3. Do you think number 3 is type 1 or type 2? Okay, if you look in between just the 4 and the 14, there's just a minus sign. So number 3 is going to be a type 1 as well. Okay, I do want you to try these on your own. You do need to copy down the problem, and then you can show your work on top. You don't have to draw the arrow and rewrite. You can just kind of overwrite the minus or the minus and negative and try to come up with the correct answer. Also, identify if it's a type 1 or a type 2. Okay, so go ahead and hit pause now, and then we can reconvene. All right, so let's take a look at the answers. We said that number 1 was a type 1 problem. 8 minus 13. The minus sign is going to change into plus a negative, and we end up with a negative 5. Okay, on number 2, we have a minus negative structure, so that's a type 2 problem. 6 minus negative 2 is going to be the same as 6 plus 2. I'm a big fat plus sign guy. 6 plus 2 is going to give me 8. All right, number 3, we see just a minus sign right there. Okay, just a minus sign. That makes it a type 1. Okay, negative 4 plus negative 14. That's a get mugged twice. You lose 4, you lose 14, you've lost 18. And listen, it's okay if you miss some of these on your own, but you do need to go back and make corrections and understand why you're missing what you're missing. All right, and number 4, we see that big minus a negative structure. That means we have a type 2. Okay, negative 14 plus 13. That ends up being a war problem. Negatives win. They win by 1. All right, number 5, I put this in here to trick you. If you just went to number 5 and said, ooh, negative 5, 5 and negative 5 must be 0, okay? You're not following the rules here. This is a type 1 or type 2. It's just a minus sign. We're talking about a type 1 problem. That means that minus sign changes to plus a negative. This is a get mugged twice. Negative 5 plus negative 5. You lose 5, you lose 5, you've lost 10. The answer here is negative 10. Make sure you understand why. Number 6, got a minus a negative structure. 17 minus negative 8. Type 2. Okay, we're going to change that minus a negative into a plus a positive, and we end up with 25. All right, number 7, 16 minus 40. That's a type 1, just a minus sign. Change that into plus a negative 40. War problems, negatives win. They win by 24. All right, back up top. See negative 30 minus negative 12. Okay, what type is this guy? Well, that minus a negative structure, that's going to give us a type 2. Okay, so we have a type 2 over here. Negative 30 plus 12. Now that's a war problem. The negatives win, and they win by 18. All right, number 9, 34 minus 21. This is second grade. You don't really need to follow the subtraction rules here that we've been talking about, but you still could if you want to. Is this a type 1 or a type 2? This is a type 1. Okay, and that minus sign changes to plus a negative. So you basically have a war problem. 34 plus negative 21. Okay, the positives are going to win, and they're going to win by 13. Number 10, minus a negative structure. So we have a type 2. Negative 13 minus negative 5 changes into negative 13 plus 5. That's a war problem. Negatives win. They win by 8. All right, number 11 is a type 2 problem. Got that minus a negative structure in there. 19 minus negative 7. That's 19 plus positive 7, for those of you guys who were taught to do plus a positive. Okay, 19 plus 7 is going to be 26. All right, number 12, 30 minus 42. That's a type 1, just a minus sign in there. It's going to change to plus negative 42. War problem, negatives win. They win by 12. Number 13, negative 12 minus negative 25. That's a type 2, because we have a minus a negative structure in there. Negative 12 plus 25. That's a war problem. Positives win. They win by 13. All right, number 14, we have negative 17 minus 30. Just a minus sign in there. That's a type 1 problem. Negative 17 plus negative 30. Now this one happens to be a get mugged twice. You lose 17, you lose 30, you have lost 47. All right, so hopefully you understand the answers for all of those. And if you messed up the first time around, that's okay, because you're going to get a little bit more practice right here. Tomorrow when you turn your work in, I do need to see the problems copied with the answer. Okay, let's move on to example 2. Okay. In example 2, you're only going to have the remainder of problems here, number 15 through 20. I want you to do the same thing. Copy down the problems, identify if it's a type 1 or type 2, and then come up with the correct answer. So go ahead and hit pause now, and then we can reconvene. Okay, let's go over answers. I will try to go through these a little bit more quickly. Number 15, it says 21 minus -7. That is a type 2. 21 plus 7 should end up with 28. Okay, number 16, 6 minus 18. That's type 1. It converts to 6 plus -18. That is war. Negatives win. They win by 12. Number 17, type 2. 23 minus -1 converts into 23 plus 1. 23 plus 1 is 24. Number 18, type 1, just a minus sign. 47 minus 29, it's also second grade. You can change it into plus -29. That's a war problem. Positives win, and they win by 18. Number 19, -26 minus -28. That is type 2. Minus the negative changes into a plus. This is a war problem. -26 plus 28. Positives win. They win by 2. All right, number 20, -17 minus 5. Notice you see just a minus sign in between there. That makes it a type 1 problem. Okay. Minus sign changes into plus a negative. -17 plus -5. That's get mugged twice. You lose 17, you lose 5. You've lost 22. Okay, so now we know war, we know get mugged twice, we know type 1 subtraction, we know type 2 subtraction, and you need to be able to keep all of these things separate in your head, and we're only going to add on more. It's really, really, really important that you have this nailed down shut. Otherwise, you're going to struggle a lot in the upcoming chapters and second semester when things start to get tough. If you need extra help, come and see me. All right, guys, good job.